It started with Frank, our maintenance guy, being found dead in the men's bathroom one morning. His neck was the most horrific, god-awful color I've ever seen on a person. Deep, dark purple, rippled with red marks where the vessels beneath his skin were burst and leaked blood into the skin. His eyes were practically falling out of his skull. Dried blood was caked black beneath his nostrils, and his trousers stank of urine. Whatever happened, he left this world in terror. The coroner said it was death by asphyxiation, but who does that to a person when they're face down in a toilet? The atmosphere in the office was foul for months after. People felt unsafe. They were shaken up and crying, and some constable bastard even started a rumor that it was some kind of weird kink shit gone wrong. Like that would matter even if it were true. As you can imagine, that particular bathroom became a ghost town immediately. Maybe it was the atmosphere playing with people, but soon there were all kinds of stories circulating. One of the women in accounting claimed that she heard the stall doors banging, and one of my marketing colleagues, Ted, swore to me with a paled expression that he heard sloshing water and the gurgles of a drowned voice. I punched him on the arm and told him to shut up, not least of all because he was freaking out our intern. It was all just rumors and stories. Then, one of the stories came true. We had a new girl start in the graphics department. She came in with a nice, upbeat attitude and made herself an absolute delight. On an otherwise dreary morning, Ted asked her almost immediately if she had heard about the bathroom, but I shut him up and kept the conversation on track as she talked about her 2 dogs with infectious enthusiasm. It was nice to have a positive force in the office for a change. Perhaps I should have let Ted warn her. It was 12:58 p.m. exactly when I heard her scream. That much I'll never forget. Her piercing shriek was like a shock wave lancing through our corporate bubble, stopping every conversation dead in its tracks and leaving a haunting silence in its wake. For a couple of seconds, it was like a bomb had gone off, and I couldn't even hear the birds outside my window. And another scream shook me out of my stupor, and I followed 2 of my colleagues who charged into the women's bathroom. The new girl threw herself into the arms of our receptionist, Katie, like a kitten being pulled from a river's curtain. She sobbed uncontrollably, shaking her head and saying, "No, no," over and over again. She hadn't even pulled her skirt all the way back up before fleeing whatever had set her off, and she couldn't stop kicking her legs long enough to stand upright. Katie stroked her hair and spoke gently to her, looking over at me with a mix of shock and confusion. I checked the stall while Katie helped the new girl fix herself up and tried to get an explanation out of her. The door was slightly off balance where it had been so violently thrown open, but nothing else was out of the ordinary. Some water on the toilet seat, yet no signs of anything that should have scared somebody so badly out of their wits. The new girl was taken into a room with HR, and I never saw her again. Her boyfriend came in and sheepishly handed Katie her written notice the next day, and that was that. She later told me over lunch. I asked him how she was. She grimaced. All he said was, "I hope you find out who did that to her." She looked at me with glistening fear. "What the Christ is going on around here, Doug?" I wish I knew. I never considered that someone could have been to blame for the incident, especially because she was totally alone in the woman's bathroom. Nobody came out, and the windows in there don't open. The police came in a few times that week, speaking to managers and checking the bathroom, but every time they emerged with a shrug. The office manager even hired an engineer to come and check the place out for carbon monoxide, but nothing was found. I know I wasn't the only one who'd bizarrely hoped for poison in our air, just so we could write the whole situation off and return to our safe bubbles. We wouldn't wait long for a reminder. I'd been out for lunch, but I came back to Ted wearing a bleeding lip and one of the graphic designers wielding a baseball bat. This is exactly why you don't play ball games inside, I tried to tell him, but he just laughed and pushed past me to the bathroom. I stood in the kitchen making idle chit-chat until the whole office was silenced like it had before. Ted started screaming bloody murder, and the sound of sloshing water told me something else was in there with him. This time I didn't hesitate, and I charged down the hall and ducked into the men's bathroom to see the locked stall shuddering and banging. "Jesus fucking Christ, help me," screamed Ted. His last two words grabbled as if his tongue couldn't move. I kicked the door, but it just deflected my foot like rubber. Sudden fear made my legs weak, and another feeble kick forced me to try another route. I climbed onto the toilet next door and nearly collapsed at the sight of the scene below. Ted was on the floor, and a long, inhuman arm had his entire lower jaw in its grip. The skin was green and corroded, like a piece of copper left to rust at the bottom of the ocean floor. The tissue was bloated and rippled like a waterlogged corpse, and it stank of the very deepest filth of the sewers. I hauled my leg over and lowered myself into the cubicle, slipping on spilt water on the tiles. I flailed to steady myself, and my hand brushed the putrid arm. As I did, I wrenched in response, and with a sickening pop and crunch, Ted's jaw was dislocated, and I screamed over the fattened fingers that were buried in his tongue. He wrestled with the arm, and I pulled myself up. He was suffering, and I'd had to use force to save him. I grabbed one of the fingers that still held his broken jaw, wrestled and pulled it back out of his mouth, and forced it backwards until it popped bubbles, burst from deeper within the toilet, fizzing on the surface and releasing the muffled screams of whatever was attached below. I popped another finger, and the arm finally let go, quickly receding back into the water. I grabbed at its elbow, and my hand failed to find purchase on the slimy skin, but I managed to wrap my fist around its wrist just before it was totally gone. I braced a foot against the bowl and pulled. I wish I hadn't pulled. With another loud pop and a sound like a wet phone book ripping in half, the arm came free at the elbow, spraying green goo and releasing a stench that made me vomit all over my shoes. Browny green filth gathered on the surface of the water, and I hammered the flusher to get rid of it as fast as possible. Unlocking the stall door, I helped the whimpering Ted to his feet and handed him off to my colleagues. When I returned to the bathroom minutes later, the arm was gone, with a new layer of filth on the toilet water. I thought and hoped that whatever that thing was had bled out and died in a pipe somewhere. That is until I saw a news report this morning. Some shaky phone footage had been taken on a street only a couple of miles from our office. It had been recorded late at night and was too dark to see most of what was going on, but a person was unmistakably being dragged into a storm drain by a pair of long, inhuman arms. The victim had been a clubgoer, and only a few pieces of him were ever found. My wife couldn't understand why I sat bolt upright when the reporter said he had been in a fight before the incident. I think I finally figured it out. It likes blood, and it's in our water system.